Today on the show, you and I discuss the proposed tax cut for the middle class, which holiday foods will make you fat, and how pizza gives us hope for humanity.
Welcome to the future, where the glass is half full and you'll need new glasses, where you'll be jumping from conclusions.
The past is annulled, and a new future is born.
Never before in history has so much meant so little to so many. AD.
You know, I suppose the best way I've heard it described, and the best way I can think of describing it, is an indulgence. This is, of course, referring to that sense of political divide that we feel, not here in America exclusively, pretty much all over the world. It's funny, you know, I talked to some friends of mine in England. I grew up there, and they are, of course, going through Brexit. And they're sort of spread out across Europe now, too. Some people still live in England. Others have emigrated to Spain. There's sort of bits and pieces of my old friendships from England flung all throughout Europe. And when I talk to them, they all say the same thing. Oh, man, don't come back here. Oh, it's just not like it used to be. Oh, we're so divided. It's awful. And you know what? That's when I tell them, oh, well, you'll be happy to know, and in case you haven't watched the news recently with regard to everything that's been going on in America, we find ourselves to be pretty divided here in the States as well. But this division, this sort of sniping at each other, this desire to know how someone voted so you can figure out what you make of them. That is, like I said, an indulgence. It's the best way I can describe it. It's a distraction. It's a distraction that's gone entirely too far. It's a distraction that plays directly into the hands of our enemies. You know who's really stoked that we're at each other's throats? The Kim Jongs and Putins of this world. They love to see us squabble amongst each other. Said it before, I will say it again. That's why you'll find that a lot of the conflict over things as little as a Star Wars movie, the conflict that you discover online over a Star Wars movie, is spread by Russian bots. Yeah, do you know about this? We talked about this a couple weeks ago on the show when it all came out. There was a lot of controversy about Star Wars. Some people thought it was a overly liberalized reimagining of the Star Wars narrative that was trying too hard to make a political statement and messing with the canon of Star Wars by taking a political stance, and people are angry about it. Well, as it turns out, a lot of the online arguing about the politicization, yeah, that sounds like a good word to me, over Star Wars came courtesy of Russian bots. Yeah, Russian bots were sowing the seeds of division among the nerdiverse. And if it's that important to the Vladimir Putins of this world, or whoever is telling the Russian bots to go make us argue with each other, to have us divided over something like Star Wars, well, not only is the division an indulgence, but we're playing directly into the hands of those who want us divided, who want us confused, who want us at each other's throats, who want us divided so that they can conquer in some way, shape, or form. The old expression, divide and conquer, well, that remains true. And it's an old expression that's been around for a very long time for a reason, because it's a principle that happens over and over again. And the idea that divide and conquer happens over and over again is just mind-numbing, because you would think that it being one of the most time-honored principles of conflict and warfare, whether that warfare be psychological or physical, that we would know to be on the lookout for it. If you're being divided, chances are someone's trying to conquer you. And we're being sort of successfully divided at the moment. But like I said, the best way I can think to describe this division is an indulgence. Really, the anger that people express toward people that have vaguely different political beliefs than them. And you see the division all over the place. You see it. You're not left enough to be calling yourself truly left. We need socialism. We need democratic socialism a la Bernie. Just being a Democrat isn't good enough. Traditional Democratic politics like Hillary will never get us there. And on the right, you rhino, you Republican in name only. I could never vote for an establishment Republican. They're just a Democrat in disguise. So there's the obvious divide down the middle, and then the warring factions are in sort of miniature civil wars. And really, ultimately, all it is like I said, these are indulgences. And this has a lot to do with, A, our enemies sowing the seeds of division among us, and B, the fact that we're coming out of this massive recession. And when people are coming out of a massive recession, when they feel as though there should be significantly more zeros behind the number in their bank account, oftentimes folks look around for someone to blame. And that need to blame someone is capitalized on by our enemies who would seek to divide us, by politicians who would seek to gain our allegiance by dividing us. It's a time-honored trap that we fall into over and over again. And it's not just us. It's not just here in America. It happens all over the rest of the world. So at least we've got that. We might not have smartened up. We might not have become better. We might not have learned from history's lessons, but at least we're only making the same mistakes that the rest of the world has made over and over again. Does that make you feel better? I don't know. But that's exactly what's going on. Now, I know you say, AD, how do we know this division is a result of the financial crisis? Well, that recession that we came out of was the biggest one in our lifetime. But it wasn't the biggest one in American history. And if you look back at political divides and extremism, you'll always find that hot on the heels of a recession or depression, people become more divided. People are at each other's throats. So we'll just continue to play our role in Act 2 of the play of economic crisis that we're going through right now. But over and over again, I will urge you to remember these divisions, these pockets of anger, these moments where we seek to blame other people for the mess our country's in, or the mess we're in, or the fact that we don't have as much money as we think we should have, or the fact that our house isn't worth as much money as it used to be, or whatever the case may be. These are, like I said, best way of describing it, indulgences. And I would always urge you to remember that and focus on something more akin to the story I'm going to tell you next. It has to do with pizza. You'll like this. Hang out.
Real radio. 104.1.
Where the left and right come together for fundamental truths. AD on the radio, on Twitter at ADSXE.
So, I think I'm just going to keep saying this until it catches on. Division, squabbles between factions on the far right and the not right enough, the far left and the not left enough. Divisions between Americans, as much as they are things that play directly into the hands of our enemies, they are, as we called them earlier, indulgences. And I say that because, well, that's exactly what they are. They are societal, sociological luxury items. Fighting amongst each other. It's a sort of thing that we dispense with. I wish we could dispense with it, this divide, this willingness to snipe at each other. I wish we could dispense with it when the chips weren't down. But the one thing that kind of gives me hope is the fact that, well, when the crucial moment comes, we seem to be able to hang together. There's always a piece of perspective that makes it very clear in certain situations that we're on the same side. And we know this. We know this in our heart of hearts. And we know this, well, we know this because things like this happen in the world. I'm going to give you a story of hope that involves pizza. Two of our favorite things. This is actually from a story in mlive.com. It's a Michigan newspaper group. I want to read to you from it for a second, if I may. Story starts saying, it's kind of poetic, sometimes pizza is more than just a meal. For Julie Morgan and Rich Morgan of Indianapolis, it was the nice gesture that came with 2 pizzas delivered from their favorite pizzeria soon after they learned that Rich would enter hospice care that made their day. Julie Morgan posted on Facebook about the experience. She said that she and Rich lived in Battle Creek, Michigan, 25 years ago. They live in Indianapolis now. They lived in Battle Creek, Michigan 25 years ago. And 25 years ago, they were a young couple, just sort of starting out. And when you're a young couple just starting out, as is often the case, there's more month at the end of the money instead of more money at the end of the month. But even though money was tight, they had a tradition. They had an indulgence that I like a lot better. Rich would bring his wife, Julie, home a pizza from Steve's Pizza every payday. Whenever he got his paycheck, he'd go to Steve's Pizza and get their favorite pizza. And, well, this is a memory that, as they made their way in the world, they cherished. This is a memory that reminded them of when they were kids, haphazard and wayward and just starting out, but with the desire to make it work and love in their heart for each other. And when they found out that Steve was sick, there was some stuff that they wanted to do. And they had planned a getaway. They had planned a getaway to Michigan to enjoy Steve's Pizza that played such an integral part in their life. It was so symbolic early on as they were making their way in the world. The couple's planned getaway to Michigan and to Steve's Pizza in Battle Creek was interrupted by a trip to the ICU, where very sadly they learned that Rich's battle with cancer was coming to an end. She wrote this on Facebook. So, rather than make the trip to Battle Creek, Michigan, they returned to Indianapolis, where they now lived, where they were enjoying spending the precious moments that they had left with family. This was when Julie Morgan's father secretly called Steve's Pizza. He described the couple's situation, hoping that the restaurant might send a card or a text, some sort of acknowledgement. A guy called Dalton Schaffer answered the phone. And when he heard their story, he said, well, what kind of pizza do they like? Schaffer said he would drive the pizzas to them after closing the shop, even though Steve's Pizza doesn't normally deliver. Now, I don't know how your geography of the Midwest is, but this involves crossing state lines. This involves traveling 225 miles. And even though this trip was across state lines, about 225 miles away, a 450-mile round trip. This 18-year-old kid, Dalton Schaffer, said, I just felt really sad for them. This 18-year-old boy, he closed the store at closing time, Saturday, October 13th. Cleaned up, hopped into his little Honda Accord to make the drive down with 2 16-inch pizzas. Their favorites. The ones that it ordered every payday all those years ago. Pepperoni and mushroom, I believe. Excuse me. And he got there. arrived at their home in Indianapolis, Indiana, pretty late, about 2:30 in the morning. This 18-year-old kid, Dalton Schaffer, he refused money for a hotel. Julie Morgan said he wouldn't take money for a hotel. He left right away to get back for work the next day, making the other half of his 450-mile round trip. Family members of the couple at the house came out and they hugged him. Schaffer told the family that they're in his prayers, and he asked everyone else to think of them during this tough time. This is what Julie Morgan wrote on Facebook. She said, "I'm beyond overwhelmed. And I'm humbled by this act of genuine kindness. Dalton brought our family so much joy. And he brought us the best pizza in the world at a really, really difficult time. While the words thank you hardly seem adequate, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Dalton from Steve's Pizza in Battle Creek, Michigan, for making your epic middle-of-the-night pizza delivery." She wrote this on Facebook, posted a photo of 2 slices of this pepperoni and mushroom pizza, exactly like she and her husband used to enjoy every payday when they were just starting out in Battle Creek, Michigan, without much to their name. And I suppose I bring this up because of what we were talking about. Not division. These indulgences. This petty griping and sniping. This playing into the hands of those that would benefit from our division. We can let it go when the crucial time comes. When the chips are down, we, like Dalton was for the Morgans, are there for each other. You think Dalton checked to see how these folks voted before he made his epic 450-mile pizza delivery trip? I don't think he did. And you know what? Ultimately, I have hope because I know you wouldn't have either.
For more stimulation and less irritation, 9 out of 10 doctors choose KPRC AM 950, Houston's more stimulating talk radio.
Don't get the blues, get all the news. We mean all of you guys out there in Radioland. All aboard!
He's back. AD on the radio.
Give it up, yeah. Give it up, yeah.
So, I hate to reduce you, me, and all of humanity in general to a crass, tasteless worship of money, but it's important to keep bringing this up because I think there's real power in this piece of knowledge. This division that you, me, all of us keep going on and on about, that all of humanity seems to be complaining about, yet is only too willing to participate in. This division is the byproduct of a financial downturn. Among many other things, there's the perfect storm of a financial downturn and the emergence of a digital age where we are effectively put into our own corners. We talked about this in the past, right? We've talked about this, how Google, Facebook, things of that nature, they were meant to bridge gaps of culture and understanding and language and all the above. Look, language barriers don't have to exist anymore thanks to Google Translate, yet we remain divided. Why? Because, Google and Facebook are trying to sell us stuff constantly. You and I have talked about this in the past, but try this sometime with some topic. I remember, I think I heard about it during a TED Talk or something like that. I don't know, some meaningless frittering I was doing with my time on the internet, where it was pointed out to me that if I look for something online, I'll get a completely different set of answers based on what I've been looking for previous to that. And this is a big part of the division that we experience, not just here in America, but all over the world. And the perfect example that I can give you of this in action is I had a neighbor who was Egyptian. He was Muslim. He was Egyptian. He, I think, was living down the hall from me because he was going to medical school. But we got to be buddies, you know. I'd be out walking my dog. I'd run into him. We'd talk. We liked the same rap music. But I had this notion to try something once, and one day with him, I did. I was like, hey, I'm going to Google Egypt on my phone, and you Google Egypt on your phone, and let's see what comes up. Bear in mind, he was Egyptian, and I am about as white and American and English as they come. And we both Googled Egypt. I saw terrorism, beheadings, fire, famine, end of the world stuff. Bear in mind, all we did was we both searched the word Egypt on Google. He saw plane tickets, hotel deals, things of that nature. Groupons for resorts, or some sort of discount code for some rather nice resort in Egypt. So I Google Egypt, I get the world is ending and they're all terrorists that want to kill you. He Googles Egypt, he gets, hey, you can get a massage for a discounted rate at this rather splendid resort in Egypt. So it is a perfect storm. A lot of the divide that we experience in America and all over the rest of the world has to do with the digital age, this thing that was meant to bridge gaps of culture and race and religion and understanding, which has only really managed to further divide us because they're trying to predictively sell us stuff the way Google does. And the financial downturn that we've experienced. You look at it time and time again. It's a lesson that history has taught us repeated times throughout the course of modern civilization, yet we seem to forget it. And there's a real historical precedent. Every time there's a fiscal downturn, every time someone's broke, and every time someone is coming out of being broke, they spend the next 10, 15, 20 years after a recession, after a depression, after some sort of financial crisis, looking around for someone to blame that it happened, or that their house isn't worth what it's supposed to be, or that they're broke, or that they lost their job. People look for someone to blame when they are fiscally uncomfortable. If we all had more zeros at the end of the number that we see pop up when we check our balance on our checking account, a lot of the at each other's throats stuff goes away. And you know what? Look, this is obviously a play. This is obviously a play at a very specific and strategic time to gain a little bit of traction going into some elections. But this might actually do something to sow some seeds of contentment. The president clarified this past Monday, just gone by, that the proposed tax cuts that he's talking about would be to help one group of people and one group of people only. That's you and me, he said, assuming that we're all middle class. Yeah. President Donald Trump spoke to reporters at the White House as he left on a campaign trip to Texas that his administration planned to produce a resolution within a couple weeks calling for a 10%, very specific number, calling for a 10% tax cut for middle-income people. We're putting in a resolution sometime in the next week or week and a half, 2 weeks. That is not a specific, but he said we're putting in a resolution. We're giving a middle-income tax reduction of about 10%. We're doing it now for middle-income people. This has been the rallying cry of politicians for the last 5-10 years. Got to do something to help the middle class. People that are fiscally disadvantaged are taking advantage of a system without doing work. People at the top are taking advantage, and who's getting sucker punched every single time one of these things happens? These massive banks and insurance companies and corporations in the wake of the financial collapse, they all got massive gazillion-dollar government bailouts. Meanwhile, people at the other end of the spectrum are reaping the reward of social benefit. And who's paying the taxes and who's getting none of the benefit? The middle class. This has been the rallying cry of politicians on the left and on the right for the past 10 years. Yet there hasn't been anything concrete done about it until now. And we don't know if it's going to be done, but that's the talk. Doing it now for middle-income people, a 10% tax reduction. Trump said his administration was studying a tax cut to be rolled out sometime around the beginning of November. Oh, you mean right before the congressional elections? Funny that. But nevertheless, this might put some cash in your pocket. And, well, cash in your pocket means cash in your pocket, which I like for you and for me and for all of us. But it also means less looking around for somebody to blame, less division, more of an ability to get along with folks. And I got to tell you, I don't care where that comes from. It could have come from Obama. It could come from Trump. If it puts money in your pocket, relieves some pressure, I am cautiously optimistic about it. Trump's fellow Republicans are all seeking in the elections to hold on to their majorities in the Senate and the House of Representatives. And this could go a long way to helping them do that. So maybe it's a ploy, but it could have a real upside for you. If you're noticing that I'm not taking a side on this one, it's because I'm not. The only thing I like is something that makes your life easier and better. But he said that the tax cuts would be unveiled before the election. They'd have to go through Congress afterwards. So there is some potential to be shenoogled on this one. I'm going to unveil these tax cuts right before the election, but they're not a lock. They got to go through Congress. He said we won't have time to do the vote. We'll vote after the election. He said that the latest tax cut plan was not meant to help businesses, but for middle income earners and would be on top of the tax decreases that we've already given them. That's a plan. That's the idea. And by the way, the idea of corporate tax, a lot of people looked at the corporate tax cuts that Donald Trump rolled out. And again, I don't have a side here. When it comes to politics, I'm here for the show. But the corporate tax cuts, I got to tell you, I was in favor of. Not because I didn't feel that it wasn't sort of a bit of a sweetheart deal for Donald Trump's. I didn't feel like there wasn't an ulterior motive. I thought there was, and I thought that was pretty clear and pretty transparent. But I also thought that putting America in a place to be competitive, where we had the highest corporate tax rates in the world, and now we're kind of even Stevens with a lot of the rest of the world, puts us in a better place as a country to compete, puts us in a better place to put more people back to work. So a lot of people looked at the corporate tax cuts and went, oh, that's just rich guys helping out other rich guys. What the hell, man? What the hell? Yeah, it definitely was that. But it makes America more competitive. So I was in favor of that. It just put us on an even keel with the rest of the world. And now, possibly 10% tax cut for the middle class. Well, this could be a good thing. Like I said, I'm cautiously optimistic about it. There's, like I said, certainly room for schnoogling because they're going to roll out the idea of the tax cut right before the election, but they won't go through until afterwards. Trump first raised the tax cut proposal in the same week that the U.S. government ended the 2018 fiscal year with a $779 billion deficit. Previous Republican-led tax cuts squeezed revenues, and the deficit was humongous. But last December, Trump signed into law the largest tax overhaul since the 1980s, which, like I said, slashed the corporate tax rate to 21% from 35% and temporarily reduced the tax burden on a lot of individuals as well. So, like I said, we'll see how this plays out. But I'm hopeful. Cautiously optimistic, I suppose.
Now, more AD on the radio.
So you and I will get into the events of today in our segment My Witness News in just a little bit. Did you see the Free Willy kid was arrested for domestic violence? Yeah, the kid that was a star of Free Willy back in the day, busted for domestic violence. Right now, though, I thought it'd be fun to share the perspective that Dana Gould offered us on Halloween. It's interesting stuff.
Halloween is actually a really interesting holiday. Halloween is when people you don't know come to where you live and take all your stuff. Next up is Thanksgiving, or as the Native Americans call it, Halloween. Now, just because I said that, it doesn't mean I don't love the country. I love the country. And you know how I know I love the country? I've never screamed its name at a rally. Love is a quiet emotion. Love doesn't engender screaming. People don't come home from the hospital, baby, baby, baby. The fact is, I've met far too many bald men with ponytails to expect this world to make sense.
Enlightened stuff. And there's one other thing I got to play for you. This is really just for the people who listen in Florida. We're on a couple of different stations in Florida. We're on, you know, what's kind of interesting? There's 2 real radios in Florida, one in Orlando, one in Palm Beach. We're on both of them. But there's something that I got to play you. Especially, this makes sense to the rest of the country as well, but especially if you're in Florida, this might ring a certain amount of true. Have a listen to this. And by the way, things are very different now in the year 2018, but have a listen to Joe Rogan's take on pain pills in Florida and tell me you don't relate to this somewhat.
Florida's got the craziest laws because Florida's trying to protect their pain pill industry. So with Florida, they make it so illegal, they hire undercover cops to pretend to be high school students. They hired a 25-year-old hot woman to pretend to be a high school student, flirt with boys, get those boys to sell her weed, and then arrest them. Some people are like, should have known better. He's almost 18. Yeah, but he's almost 16 too. Which is almost 15. That's like a little kid. Do you remember what you were like when you were 17? And this kid wasn't even a drug dealer. This kid, it's not like he got caught. No, this kid was a straight A student that thought he was getting pot for his girlfriend. He even tried to give it to her. She wouldn't accept it. She wanted to give him money so she could arrest him. Meanwhile, the 25-year-old cop's like, let's go back to my house, smoke some pot. That kid's like, you have a house?
All right, let's get into the events of today in our segment, My Witness News. And yeah, like I said, that Free Willy kid was arrested for domestic violence. Hey, I don't know if you caught this or not. You know who's a good sport? Pete Davidson. Yeah. Pete Davidson joked about his breakup with Ariana Grande during a charity show he hosted this past Saturday night, just gone by, with Judd Apatow. He said, well, as you could tell, I don't want to be here. There's a lot going on. Does anybody have any open rooms? I'm looking for a roommate. He also told the crowd, quote, I've been covering a bunch of tattoos. That's fun. I'm 0 for 2 in the tattoo department. Yeah, I'm afraid to get my mom tattooed on me. That's how bad it is. When Judd Apatow praised him for doing the show, Pete said, well, you put me on the flyer. I had to. F my feelings. Judd said he cares more about America than Pete's feelings, and Pete replied, quote, I feel like I am America. I'm a good guy that just keeps getting kicked in the crotch. So there you have it. The top Halloween costumes of the year. Do you do the Halloween thing? Do you dress up? I will wind up going to some Halloween party, and I will not be dressed up. But it'll be my job, and I'll have to be there, so I'll go. But I don't do the whole dressing up thing as an adult, for reasons that we've discussed a couple times on the show. But as we were saying earlier, Google knows pretty much everything about you, so it makes a lot of sense that what you're wearing for Halloween is part of that. Google analyzed searches for Halloween costumes and found the top 500 things that people are planning to dress up as this year. Don't have the airtime to go through all 500, obviously, so the top 10 are a princess, a rabbit, a pirate, a superhero, Harley Quinn, the character from Suicide Squad and Batman, a witch, a dinosaur. It's all got to be those big dinosaurs, those big inflatable dinosaurs. Those are a great costume a couple of years ago. Now they're really good costumes, but it wasn't like a few years back when you're like, oh my God, that's amazing. A unicorn in at number 3, and at number 2, Spider-Man, and the number 1 costume of the year, according to the folks over at Google, Fortnite. There you have it. Now you know. Nose warmers. Nose warmers are a thing. They've made the news. Yes. How silly are you willing to look to stay warm this winter? Only because there's a product, nose warmers, going viral right now. And basically, it's like a small winter hat for your schnoz. Yeah, it's a hat for your nose. You put it on your nose so it looks like a beak, and then tie the straps around the back of your head. It will keep your nose warm. You will look ridiculous in the process. The nose warmers were invented by a woman named Sally Steele Jones in England, and she sells them on her website in a bunch of different styles, including fleece, faux fur, wool, leopard print, and more. If you want one, you can get one at nosewarmer.com, and looks like it'll cost you around $13 including shipping. There you go. There you have it. Hold on, let me just look at this picture. Yeah, no, that's silly. Although, I mean, when you were a kid, did you used to wear those ski masks to help keep your face warm in the winter? Now, if you're listening on either of the real radios in Florida, keeping your face warm during the wintertime is not as much of a concern as if you are listening in one of the colder climates where this show airs. But when we were kids, we used to wear those ski masks. Now, ski mask says bank robber or terrorist, so I guess the only way you can keep your nose warm is with a scarf and one of these nose warmer things. Otherwise, you risk being gunned down as a suspected terrorist. So maybe the nose warmer lady is onto something. $13 it'll cost you. And, compared to getting shot as a suspected terrorist, well, that's really nothing. Nothing at all. Nothing, I tell you. We are rolling up on the holiday season, and, experts have identified the 6 foods that are major culprits when you look at holiday weight gain. Hollywood weight gain. And at number 1, eggnog. Alcohol alone has a whole bunch of calories. Then you add eggs, sugar, and cream. 1 cup tends to be 350 calories compared to around 100 calories in light beer. So eggnog, terrible for you. Deviled eggs, nearly twice as many calories as a normal egg because of all the mayo, and just one of them has almost an entire day's worth of cholesterol, and people go through them really quick at holiday parties. It takes like 2 seconds to eat, and it's mind-numbingly bad for you. Meatballs. They're concentrated calories that usually have a ton of fat, so let your friend on the paleo diet eat them, and then you can laugh when they can't figure out why they haven't lost any weight yet. Spinach artichoke dip. Oh my gosh, so unbelievably delicious, but so terrible for you. The fact that spinach and artichoke are in the name makes it sound a lot healthier than it actually is. The reason it tastes so good the reason spinach artichoke dip tastes so freaking good, it has to do with all the cheese and the sour cream, which are clearly not good for you. All right, do we have time to do the Free Willy story? Yeah. Remember the kid who freed Willy? Well, he recently got arrested after accusing his girlfriend of freeing someone else's Willy. Last Monday, former child actor Jason James Richter was arguing with his girlfriend over whether she'd had an affair with a coworker. The woman said he grabbed her after kicking in a door to get to her. He was charged with 2 misdemeanors, vandalism and battery that did not cause an injury. He was released on $20,000 bail, but not until the following Wednesday. He was 11 when he started 1993's Free Willy. He went on to do 2 sequels. He's 38 now. Go figure.